I want to introduce our speaker. I know a lot of you, I hope, read the article that was in the back page of the Eagle. Sichan, former ambassador to United Nations for the U.S. He was in charge. He was over the United Nations Economic and Social Council from 2001 to 2006. From 1989 to 1993, Ambassador Siv served at the White House as Deputy Assistant to the President George H.W. Bush, and at the State Department as Deputy Assistant Secretary. He has also held various positions in the private sector and has written 2 books. We've got one of them that we're just starting to read. And I know I'm not going to pronounce this right, but Sichan was born in Pocatong, Cambodia. Am I pretty close? Oh, I'm pretty close. In 1948, his entire family, 15 total, including his mother, was killed during the Pol Pot's reign of terror. 15 people in his family. He arrived in the United States in 1976 at the age of 28. He has a wonderful story to share. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Ambassador Sichan Siv.
Thank you so much for the introduction. I think you should write a book about your jokes.
Be a bad book.
I want you to buy 10 copies. It will be a good Christmas present. It's a joyful privilege for me to be with you today. I want to salute all of you who have served our nation very well. And it's truly a humbling experience to be here on August 13, 2024, which is actually a very special month in many parts of our history. I will tell you more about it. In the next 36 minutes, I'm going to share with you the life, the love, and the leadership that I learned from 3 people. 3 people, that's my mother, she gave me life, my wife Martha, who gave me love, and George H.W. Bush, who taught me about life, love, and leadership, and how to be a complete person. As David mentioned, I was born not too far from this terminal, less than a mile. And you recognize my wife, Carol. You remember Martha? Martha was at the center there. I was born less than a mile from this terminal when Cambodia was under French rule. So I grew up speaking French and eating French food. And France was everything to us. France was the mother country. Everything was from France, of France, for France. Until 1953, when Vice President Mrs. Nixon came to visit, our teachers told us that there was another country, much bigger and farther away than France. It's called United States of America. That was the first time I learned about the United States. My father died when I was young, when I was 9 years old, so my mother brought me up. She told me, since I was at a young age, to never give up hope, no matter what happens. So hope kept me alive in some of the most difficult circumstances, and hope brought me all the way to the United States, to the White House, and to Texas. In 1969, I finished high school. I became a flight attendant, so I flew all over Asia. I flew to China during the Cultural Revolution. I was there 3 years before Nixon and Kissinger went to visit. So in the spring of 1975, George H.W. Bush was ambassador to China. And here you have President Ford gave an address to the joint session of Congress. He said, for this administration, the time is short and the options are few as far as Cambodia and South Vietnam are concerned. At the time, I was working in dangerous circumstances trying to save the lives of hundreds and thousands of people who fled the war-torn countryside to seek safety and shelter in cities and the capital. George Bush was 2,000 miles away from me in 2 different time zones, but we never met until 13 years later. I was not a US citizen, and the United States Embassy told me that when the time came, I would have only 1 hour, half an hour, 30 minutes. I had 1 hour to be at the embassy if I want to be airlifted out of Cambodia. As I said, I was not a US citizen, I was just working for an American organization. That time came 2 days after President Ford gave this address. On April 12th, I was told by the embassy to be at the embassy within 1 hour if I wanted to be airlifted out of Cambodia. But I had a meeting with the governor of the province where we were trying to feed some 3,000 refugee families stranded in that province. I thought that by going to the meeting, I would be able to save the lives of those people. When I came to the embassy, I was told that the last helicopter had taken off 30 minutes before. So I missed the US evacuation by 30 minutes. In the spring of 1976, 1 year later, George Bush became director of the CIA on January the 31st, 1976. 13 days later, I jumped off a truck in the jungle of Cambodia. I was alone at the back of the timber truck, but I could not jump to the left because the driver would see me through the rearview mirror. I could not jump to the right because a Khmer soldier with an AK-47 would have seen me. So I crawled on top of the timber and just dropped myself behind the truck. As I was tumbling down, I was caught in a piece of lumber and I was dragged for a few hundred yards. Then I was flung off and I began to walk, to run, to crawl for 3 days, having nothing to eat, nor to drink. Nothing to drink except hope that kept me alive. Nothing to guide me except the suns, the stars, and the moon. I was severely wounded in a booby trap, but I was able to limp along until I got to Thailand, where I was jailed for illegal entry. A few weeks later, I was sent to a refugee camp. This is the size of half the size of a soccer field. There are some 3,000 refugees living there. Many suffered severe mental depression. They sat around all day worrying about the future and feeling sorry about the past. I thought I would organize something to keep them busy, so I organized English classes. It was a win-win proposal. Many of them were going to an English-speaking country. At the same time, they were able to get some basic English and take their minds off the sorrows and the worries. On June 4th, 1976, 1 month before the bicentennial, I arrived in Wallingford, Connecticut, with my mother's scarf, an empty rice bag, and $2. I was sick and tired, but I was full of hope. I picked apples. I ate a lot of apples, enough to last for a lifetime. Then I went to work at a fast food restaurant. They wanted to train me to be a manager, but I had to learn how to cook hamburgers, scoop ice cream, wash dishes. I never seen a hamburger in my life. Suddenly I was hearing rare, medium rare. I was holding the lettuce and the trainer said, hold the lettuce. Took me a while to understand they didn't want me to put the lettuce on the hamburger. I said, this is difficult, so next stop, New York, New York. January 1977, cold winter day. I saw all these checkers coming down with sign in the back, drivers wanted. So I called, they asked me to go and take a test. It's all about direction. How do you get from the Waldorf Astoria to Yankee Stadium? For example, I had no idea where these places were, much less how to get from one to another, so I just checked the boxes. At the end, I brought the sheet to the examiner. He looked at the boxes, he frowned, he looked at me from head to toe. He shook his head, he said, I passed. So I became a taxi driver. In 1977, you didn't need to know where you were going. To be a driver in New York, you need strong horn and good brakes. And I was amazed that New Yorkers could communicate in sign language. I just did everything that came my way to the best of my ability. I went to Columbia to do a Master of International Affairs, and I worked on Wall Street and various organizations. Along the way, I met this wonderful woman named Martha Patillo, and Carol remember her. She was from a small town in the Panhandle called Pampa. How many of you know where Pampa is? Good job. Pampa is 60 miles northeast of Amarillo. That's a place where wheat grows, oil flows, and wind blows. And when I saw Martha, we met on September 15, 1977 in New York at her apartment. My life changed. She opened new horizons for me. She showed me how to look far to see, listen to hear, learn to live, love to give, and live to serve. For serving others is serving God and country. So we were introduced to the Reagans in the 80s, and then we began to receive invitations to the White House. One was for July 13, 1988. That was the first time I met George Bush. So all this time, we were traveling in pilot track. He was in China, I was in Cambodia. I came to Connecticut, he left Connecticut to come to Texas. There we go, we met at the White House in the Rose Garden. And while I was standing there, the thought never crossed my mind that a few months later I would be working for him, for George Bush, and he would become the most influential person in my life. This year is his centennial. He was born on June 12, 1924. So in June, we went to College Station to celebrate his centennial in the library. So I'll tell you more about that later. But for me to make it from the killing fields to the White House in 13 years, that was a tribute to George Bush. When George Bush was sworn in on January the 20th, 1989, he offered a prayer. He was the first president to offer a prayer in his inaugural. He said, Almighty Father, please remind us that the only purpose of power is to serve the people. So that stuck in my mind, the only purpose of power, or position, or possession is to serve the people. So George Bush was probably the most qualified person to be president of the United States. He was representative in the US Congress. He was ambassador to the UN and to China, chairman of the INC, director of the CIA, and vice president for 8 years. So by the time he got to the White House, he knows quite a bit about how the world works. And to me, it was quite an amazing experience to be there at the White House 13 years only after I was running for my life through the jungle of Cambodia. That is a great tribute to George Bush and to America. So to be there is quite an experience, but to be in the Oval Office with the president is even more amazing, and to be alone in the White House, in the Oval Office with the president was a memorable experience. In 2001, George W. Bush was elected. He asked me to represent our country at the United Nations. That was a special assignment because New York United Nations is something that we helped for co-founder. New York is the co-founder. The United States is the co-founder. New York is the largest diplomatic community in the world, and we are the largest manufacturer to many United Nations programs. Everything from cradle to coffin, everything in between, human rights, HIV/AIDS, women, health, education, children. We are there at the top. We are doing that not to be popular. We are doing it because It is our duty to honor our country because America is a very compassionate society. So it's an honor for me to work for two presidents, both named Bush. They say I work behind the bushes. And all of this, as David mentioned, is summarized in this book called Golden Bones. It's published in different languages. And golden bones are terms that Cambodians use to refer to somebody who is very blessed, who is very lucky. I think we are people of golden bones because we are blessed, we are lucky to be American. In my spare time, I interacted with the Boy Scouts. I interacted with the cadet of the SEAL Air Patrol. Donnell and I are members of the SEAL Air Patrol, which I joined since I was at the White House. And occasionally, every year since 2007, President Bush himself started the Boy Scout program at the Bush Library in College Station. And since then, I've been the principal speaker since President Bush started. At home, we attended the First Presbyterian Church downtown. On December 4th, 2016, I decided to be baptized. As you know, I grew up as a Buddhist. After I met Martha, I spent more time in the Presbyterian Church than a Buddhist temple. After the baptism, Martha told me that was my best gift to her. 10 days later, she lifted off to be in heaven. I have seen a lot of tragedies in my life, as David mentioned, 15 members of my family, including my mother, my sister, my brother, and their children were all killed by the Khmer Rouge, but losing Martha was the worst. But by the grace of God, I was able to navigate through grief with the support of my church and my close friends. And I devoted my life entirely to God and country. So what was life? What has been life after loss? The first thing I did was to go to the Holy Land. And if you have not been there yet, you should put it on the list. I went to all these places and I couldn't believe what I saw there. Everything that I read in the Bible is that where I was. The Sea of Galilee, Nazareth, and so on and so forth. I went even to the baptism site, which is on the Jordanian side. Coming back home, I began to visit churches around the world. This is in Iraq. Iraq has lost about 80% of its Christian population. You recognize, I'll tell you, the one on the left is in Basra, and the one on the right is in Baghdad. Both are Presbyterian church. Then in Western Hemisphere, I traveled to donate motorcycles to pastors in remote villages. So this is in a village called Las Maravillas in Guatemala. While before I went there, I received a memo from Jean Becker, who was chief of staff to President Bush, post-White House until he died. She wrote to 5 of us. She told us that when the president died, you would be invited to accompany his body on Air Force One. I was one of the 5 non-family members invited to be on Air Force One. December 3rd, 2018, that was the day. It was quite an emotional trip for me because not only that I was able to work for him only 13 years after I escaped from the killing fields, and there I was the only person in the plane that was not born in the United States. So I wrote a poem in that flight from Ellington Field in Houston to Andrews Air Force Base in Maryland. I said, once we were 4 with a Christmas tree, then we were 3 by a shining sea. Now I'm alone but not lonely, for God is with us, with you and me. Soon we'll be together again, together forever through eternity. 4, 3, 1. And I continue to interact with our military. This is Travis Air Force Base. Before I went to Travis, I asked the Air Force that I don't want just to go in and out to give a speech, but I want to spend time with our airmen. I want to worship with them. I want to go to the gym with them. I want to eat breakfast. I want to eat lunch and I want to eat dinner. So I was there for 3 days. And you know, Travis is the largest air mobility command base in the United States. All the big planes are there, C-5, C-17, the KC-10. And when I was there, we were sending plane loads of C-5 full of COVID-19 equipment to India. That is a reflection of what America is all about, that we are a compassionate society. On the East Coast, I went to Charleston Air Force Base. I interacted with the 315 airlift wing that was involved in the evacuation in Afghanistan on August 15, 2021, which is a very sad moment for us, for me especially, because I was in an evacuation. Despite the flawless evacuation by the Ford administration, not one life was lost. I missed the helicopter. And I was able to get out by myself 1 year later. But in Kabul, in Afghanistan, we lost 13 military personnel in that evacuation. And then you had the Secretary of Defense who said, we had no way to reach the Americans. And then the Chairman of the Joint Chief who said, we didn't know it was coming. The Secretary of State who said it was a Saigon moment. And then the President of the United States who said it was an extraordinary success. If we lost 13 military personnel, we consider that as a success. What would a failure be? I was just dumbfounded. In San Antonio, I volunteered with George and David and a few other people at the airport. And even I spent my birthday volunteering there at the airport. I serve on the Texas Board of Criminal Justice, which oversees the prison system. In Texas, we have 100 units. I'm proud to be the first one to have seen all 100 units in 175 years of the department history. I was invited by the French government to see Notre Dame, when it was totally closed. It will be reopened again in December 7. You want to see, you can go and see. And I was one of 8 people that was invited to see. Even the French, they was quite surprised. My French friends asked me, how did you get in there? I said, I am lucky. I went to Africa, here to Zambia. I was giving testimony at the church there, giving motorcycles to remote places in Livingstone, Zambia. 1 week I was in Livingstone, Zambia. The next week I was in Livingstone, Texas. And this for Babs, this is Korea, your favorite country. I serve on the World Reform Fellowship, so we move our meetings from one country to another. This was in Seoul, and you may not know this, but Korea has the largest population of Presbyterian in the world, proportionally, larger than the United States. And this is the President Church, and this is another church called Sarang in Korean, which means love. This is the largest underground church in the world. Underground meaning they build down, because they are the center of Seoul, they couldn't build out. There are no space, so they build down. 75,000 members. Just imagine every Sunday you're 8,000 in, 8,000 out, 8,000 in, 8,000 out. It moves like clockwork. And of course, my message of love that David already read. Here at home, I went to Chewak, Alaska. Chewak is about 500 miles west of Anchorage. It's almost at the end of the world. Because you go a few more miles, you get to the Bering Sea, you can see Russia. It's a community of Chupik population. They are not Eskimos. They are Chupik people. Each family has an ATV and a snowmobile. That's how they got around. So you want to be the light. I told the children, you want to be the light, or the word, and the light shine before others. In Washington, I am involved with the National Celebration of Reading, which was founded by Barbara Bush. And every year we have this event to help support literacy around the United States. 150 million Americans cannot read at the 6th grade level. Can you believe you cannot read prescription, you cannot do grocery label? It creates enormous challenge. And as I mentioned a moment ago, we had the 41 and 100 when we celebrate George Bush centennial. I was reunited with some of my colleagues, some of them I haven't seen for 35 years. And this is an old photo from People magazine. And you recognize there's a computer against the wall. It's a Wang computer, it's about this size, this big. That's how the White House and the State Department functioned in 1989. That computer had a problem one day, and the GSA technician came to fix it up. And I'm always curious, and I always want to make new friends. So I asked her, what do you do on weekends? She told me that I'm volunteer at the Civil Air Patrol. I said, what is the Civil Air Patrol? So this is a guy who worked for the President of the United States, and he didn't know what the Civil Air Patrol was. But I admit, my fault. If anything, a guiding light for me is a verse, 1 Corinthians 8:2. Those who think they know something do not know yet what they ought to know. I plead guilty for that. So explain to me, and that's how I became a member of the Civil Air Patrol. And I've been a member for 33 years. So this is last June. You see these two pictures? You recognize me, right? I have black hair. And you recognize me, I have a hat. So that's what is about the legacy that George Bush left for us. Each of us has friends at different stages of life, but the lucky ones are the ones who have the same friends throughout the life. So I consider myself as lucky to have had friends and to have served a very good president. Remember 9/11? All of you remember how you got to know about 9/11? There's 4,500 planes were in the skies that morning. They all were ordered to land within a few hours, except one plane that belonged to the Civil Air Patrol. This is the one. So I was thinking about doing something to honor George Bush. He was a pilot. He was shot down in the Pacific on September 2nd, 1944. And I thought of this plane which I saw at Maxwell Air Force Base at the headquarters of Civil Air Patrol. I inquired about that plane, and he told me that it's somewhere in New England and they are about to retire. I said, can I fly it? So they put me in touch with the regional commander. And that's another verse, ask, you'll be answered. Seek and you'll find. Knock, it'll be open. ASK. So the regional commander sent me a text message saying that we understand you want to fly this plane. When can you come? I said June, because I usually go to Connecticut in June to celebrate my anniversary. And he said, we'll make it happen. A few days later, he sent another text. He said, can you come earlier in March? Because this plane is going to go to the U.S. Air Force Museum in Dayton, Ohio. It's going to be retired. I said, I'll be there. So I got to fly. You remember 9/11. George W. Bush was meeting children in elementary school. He was in a reading class. He had a program called No Child Left Behind. And then Andy Carr, the chief of staff, walked in and whispered into his ear, a second plane hit the second tower. America is under attack. And he walked away. And Bush was able to compose. He didn't want to panic the children. And the rest is history. They were in Sarasota, Florida. They were going to fly back to Washington, but Dick Cheney told him not to because it's not safe. So they flew to Barksdale in Louisiana. And then from Barksdale, they went to Offutt in Nebraska. And finally, he went back to Andrews. So when I went to Connecticut, that plane I went to Christchurch in Greenwich, Connecticut, where George Bush worshipped when he was a child, before he moved to great state of Texas, right? I was able to connect something to that because you may not know that Moses Austin, Stephen Austin's father, he was from Connecticut also. So he came here to San Antonio in 1820, and he died. So his son took over the program to settle what you know now as Texans. So if Austin came from Connecticut to Texas, Bush 41 came from Connecticut to Texas, Bush 43 came from Connecticut to Texas, and then you have Sichan Siv. So the day of March 3rd, I went to this airport near Hartford, Connecticut, called Brainerd. And Major Prue and I flew for 3 hours over Connecticut, Rhode Island, New York, and Massachusetts. And the touching point for me was that we were able to land in New Haven, which was the airport I landed in 1976. That was my final stop when I came here as a refugee. So I told Colonel Riley, this is quite emotional for me. I think this ride is only second to Air Force One. So there I was with that plane, and it's now in Dayton. And this is submarine base. This plane was the first aircraft to escort submarines from Groton out to the Sound into the Atlantic Sea. When I came back to Texas, I went straight to the Bush Library. Andy Card, who was chief of staff, who whispered into George W. Bush's ears, he is now the chairman of the George Bush Foundation. So I went to give him a flag of the US Coast Guard because when he was Secretary of Transportation, the Coast Guard was under him. And I gave a few other mementos for the foundation as well as for the library. His portrait, Bush portrait, the two Bush portrait. And July 20th, Donald and another friend of ours, Chris Spradley, we went to College Station to commemorate the 55th anniversary of the moon landing. And I was speaking to the Boy Scout again. That was my latest interaction with the Boy Scout. We say that behind a good man there's a good woman, right? To me, I said behind a good man, 10 stand a Texan librarian. So God bless you and God bless America. It's a duty, honor, and country. This is my favorite verse. I was a stranger and you brought me in. Like today, I was a stranger and you brought me in. Thank you again, and I dedicate this presentation to Martha and to the Bushes. Thank you.